The village of Osun was cradled in the green, humid palm of the Volta Basin, a place where the river's breath was a constant, damp kiss on the skin. Here, stories were not just told, they were woven. The women of the Kaya people were the keepers of history, their looms the vessels of memory. Every bolt of cloth told a tale of birth, of war, of famine, of kings. The patterns were rigid, the colors prescribed, the stories ancient and unchangeable. Amara was a weaver, perhaps the most gifted of her generation. Her fingers, long and elegant, could dance across the threads with a speed that left the other, women, breathless. But a quiet rebellion simmered in her blood, a yearning as deep and insistent as the river's current. She was tired of weaving the stories of the dead. She longed to weave a story that was alive, a story that was hers. Her grandmother, before she had joined the ancestors, had whispered a secret to her, a story untold in the communal weaving hut. It was the story of the Anansantoma, the soul cloth. She had spoken of a forgotten ritual, a way of weaving that transcended mere craft. "The truest patterns, my child," the old woman's voice had rasped, "thin as a single thread, are not made by the hands alone. They are spun from the heat of the soul, from the rhythm of two spirits beating as one. It is a story told by the body, a whisper woven into the very heart of the cloth." It was a dangerous knowledge, a magic that blurred the line between the sacred and the profane, and Amara had locked it away in her heart. Then he came. His name was Kayalo, and he arrived with the Harmattan winds, dust on his skin and the scent of distant mahogany clinging to him. He was not of the Kaya. He was a carver, summoned from the northern grasslands to restore the village's great totem pole, which had been scarred by lightning. The first time Amara saw him, he was standing before the totem, his hand resting on the weathered wood as if listening to its secrets. He was tall, his body a symphony of long, lean muscles sculpted by his trade. His hands were what captured her, large, calloused, yet possessing a grace that spoke of immense control and artistry. When he turned, and his eyes, dark and deep as a forest pool at midnight, met hers, a jolt, sharp and electric, passed through her. It was a shock of recognition, a silent acknowledgement between two makers, two souls who spoke in the language of form and texture. Their courtship was a slow, tentative dance, conducted in the spaces between their work. He would come to the edge of the weaving hut, ostensibly to watch the women, but his gaze would always find Amara. He never spoke, not at first. He simply watched, his presence a warm, solid weight in the air. She, in turn, would find reasons to walk by the totem, her bare feet silent on the packed earth, pretending to fetch water or herbs, just to watch the muscles in his back and shoulders shift as he worked his chisels. The air between them grew thick with unspoken things, with the scent of shea butter from her skin and sawdust from his. One evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the sky, he finally spoke to her. She was washing her threads in the river, the vibrant indigo and crimson coils floating like serpents in the water. "The colors," he said, his voice a low thrum that vibrated in her chest. "They speak. What do they say?" Amara looked up, startled. No one had ever asked her that. The colors were simply the colors. Red for blood and life, blue for the sky and the gods, gold for wealth. "They say what they have always said," she answered, her voice quieter than she intended. He crouched beside her, his long shadow merging with hers on the riverbank. "But what do you want them to say?" he asked, his gaze intense. Hakon reached out, not touching her, but hovering his fingers over a coil of brilliant saffron thread. This color, it is not just the sun. It is the feeling of the sun on the skin after a long rain. It is the taste of ripe mango. It is laughter. In that moment, Amara knew he understood. He saw the world as she did, not as a collection of fixed meanings, but as a living tapestry of sensation and emotion. That night, she did not sleep. She lay on her mat, listening to the symphony of the jungle, her body humming with a new and terrifying energy. He was the missing note in her song, the color absent from her palette. Their secret meetings began. They would meet by the river after the village slept, under the conspiratorial gaze of the moon. They spoke of their art. He told her how he felt, the spirit of the animal or ancestor in the wood before he ever made a cut, how his work was a process of releasing a story already trapped inside. She, in turn, confided in him her frustration with the rigid traditions of the loom, her desire to weave not just history, but feeling. One night, emboldened by the darkness and the intimacy of their shared confessions, she told him the secret her grandmother had passed down. She spoke of the soul cloth. "It is said," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "that the loom can become an extension of the body. That when two people, when their spirits and their bodies are joined, the weaver can translate that energy, that fire, directly into the threads. The cloth that is born from such a union is not just a cloth. It is alive. It holds the echo of that union forever." Kalo listened, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. She feared she had scared him, that he would see her as unchaste or mad. He was silent for a long time, the only sound the chirping of crickets and the gentle lapping of the river. Then he reached out and took her hand. His calloused palm was warm and rough against her smooth one. "Show me," he said, his voice husky. "Show me how to make a story come alive." The tension that had simmered between them for weeks, finally, broke its banks. His words were not a demand, but an invitation, a surrender. He was offering not just his body, but his spirit, to be a part of her art. She led him not to her family hut, but to her grandmother's old, abandoned weaving shelter at the edge of the village, hidden by a thick curtain of flowering hibiscus. The air inside was cool and smelled of dust, dried herbs, and the faint, ghostly scent of the old woman herself. In the center of the room stood the whispering loom, a magnificent creation of dark, polished ironwood, its frame worn smooth by generations of hands. It was here her grandmother had woven her own secret cloths. Amara lit a single palm oil lamp, the flame casting long, dancing shadows. She had already warped the loom with threads of the deepest indigo, the color of the night sky, and a shimmering silver thread that shone like moonlight. She had prepared for this night without even knowing it, guided by an instinct she was only now beginning to understand. There was a hesitancy at first, a sacred shyness that filled the small space. He stood by the entrance, a tall silhouette, against the star-dusted sky, watching her. She moved to the loom, her fingers tracing the taut threads. The room was silent, yet it thrummed with a palpable energy, the combined force of their anticipation. "The story needs a beginning," she murmured, her back to him. He moved then, his steps noiseless on the earthen floor. He came to stand behind her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He did not touch her, not yet. He simply breathed in the scent of her hair, a mixture of coconut oil and the wild jasmine she tucked behind her ear. And "What is the beginning?" he whispered, his breath a warm caress against her neck. "It begins with touch," she answered, her voice barely audible. His hands, those magnificent artist's hands, came to rest on her shoulders. The touch was not possessive, but reverent. It was a question. Her own hands stilled on the loom, and she leaned back into his strength, a silent answer. His fingers began a slow, deliberate exploration, tracing the line of her collarbone, the delicate curve of her neck, learning the shape of her as he would learn the grain of a piece of wood. Every touch sent a cascade of fire through her veins. She turned in his arms, her body molding against his. She lifted her hands to his face, her weaver's fingertips exploring the sharp line of his jaw, the surprising softness of his lips. It was a conversation without words, a language of texture and heat. His skin was warm and smooth, smelling of wood smoke and the dry, clean scent of the grasslands. Her skin was cool and soft, smelling of river water and flowers. Their kiss was not a gentle meeting. It was a conflagration, a release of all the pent-up longing, all the unspoken words of the past weeks. It was deep and searching, a taste of mango and honey, of salt and earth. It was a promise of the story they were about to create. He slowly, reverently untied the knot of her wrapper. The cloth fell away, pooling at her feet like a sigh. The lamp flame flickered, casting a golden glow on her skin, on the proud jut of her hips and the gentle swell of her breasts. Kalo's gaze was one of awe, the look of a carver beholding the most perfect form. He knelt before her, his hands tracing the lines of her body, from her ankles, up her calves, over the curve of her thighs. His touch was a prayer, an act of worship that made her tremble. She guided him to the woven mat beside the loom. The world outside, the village, the rules, the ancestors, it all fell away. There was only the small, sacred space of the hut, the flickering lamp, the silent loom, and the overwhelming presence of each other. Their lovemaking was a dance, a rhythm that began slow and tender, and built into a powerful, driving cadence. It was an act of discovery. She learned the strength in his back, the way his muscles coiled and bunched beneath her hands. He learned the sensitive arch of her foot, the spot behind her ear that made her gasp, the way her body blossomed and opened for him like a